performance of Coming to Zim is part of the theatre program presented by Zoe. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Enjoy your show.
Mr. James Carey, it was with excitement that we heard of your interest in our festival. I visited your website and admired your work. Can you tell me if you are still interested in adjudicating? The festival will be at the end of June, early July 2012. If you are, we can begin talking about the reality of this offer. Gavin Peter, NIAA Festival Director, Harare, Zimbabwe.
What does the term "an empty shell of a man" mean? Well, if you go online, there are hundreds of definitions, but this is the one that jumped out at me. A man who is wiped out, exhausted, emotionally, maybe even physically. It means he has lost his purpose in life and maybe even his will to live. How do you get to be an empty shell of a man? That's a fairly dramatic statement. There are other words that you could use to describe this feeling. Would be overwhelmed, knocked about, exhausted, weary, drained. It was October 2011, and I was a shell of myself. Now, I hadn't lost my will to live, but I'd certainly lost my purpose in life. So therefore, I was somewhat mentally and emotionally dead inside. Now, anyone that's ever traveled this road before reaches it in a different way. For me, I had just ended a 3-year relationship. My house was in real danger of being taken away, and a business that I'd run for 25 years was on the edge of collapse. Things could have looked worse, but at the moment I didn't see how. I doubted myself and my own accomplishments. I had the realization that maybe my life, both personally and professionally, might be over, and that this was all that was ever going to be. Now first, the relationship. We'd been going together for about 3 years, and we were very much in love, but at best I could say the relationship was dysfunctional. But after 3 years, I wanted a commitment. I wanted to get married. She said no, and she had 4 very strong reasons not to. First was religion. She was a Muslim, I was a Christian. Second of all was race. She was Indian, I was a white guy. Third was money. Her father was a multimillionaire and I was currently broke. Fourth was age. I was 25 years older than she was. But there we were after 3 years. But those 4 reasons and the constant pressure of her family in India really took a toll on our relationship. And finally, in the summer of 2011, she said she was leaving and she was gone. In my house. Now, the worldwide economic downturn had caused me to rent every single bedroom in my house just in order to be able to live there. Now, the downturn in 2008 had killed my house flipping business. Now, house flipping is where you buy an old house, you fix it up, and you sell it hopefully for a profit. House flipping. Now, to pay for this venture, I had taken all the equity out of my super highly overinflated California house and put it in the business. And I made a lot of money. And I spent a lot of money. And I had a lot of fun. Cars, girls, nightclubs, trips. I was living the life. Until one day I woke up and it was gone. I was in debt to the tune of $1 million US. I lost everything. I lost my business, I lost my savings, I lost my credit, I lost all my other properties. The only thing I had left was my house. But that was in real danger of being taken away. And then finally, my business. When I first moved to Los Angeles, I had started a nonprofit live theater. And after 25 years, I was still running it. And everything in my life, both good or bad, comes from the founding of that theater. So sometimes we had sold-out shows, and sometimes we couldn't find anybody to take our seats. But for 25 years, we managed to persevere. And in all times of emotional crisis, I always returned to my theater, to my art, to my work. The passing of my mother, my divorce. But this time, my salvation was also my prison, because just like my house, the theater was buried in debt. So from 2008 to 2011, I did whatever I could to keep the doors open. I sold tickets, I cleaned the toilets, I'd go out in the street and find somebody and stick them in a seat. Anything to keep the doors open. And after 3 years, I had paid off all of our debt. In October 2011, I wrote the last check that closed our debt, $100,000 in 3 years. But instead of feeling happy at my amazing accomplishment, I was sad. I was depressed. I was lonely and very uncreative. I didn't really care about anything. I didn't care if the theater stayed open or if it closed. As a matter of fact, I didn't care about anything at all. As I looked at my life, I saw it as a series of diminishing returns, and that no matter how long I stayed alive, whether that was 10, 15, or 25 years, that every year would be a little less than the year before. So I can honestly say that in October 2011, I was a shell of myself.
Dear Mr. Gavin Peter, I'm extremely interested in pursuing discussions about adjudicating your festival. Sounds like the trip of a lifetime. So let's continue discussions. Yours, James Carey.
Now, how do you get invited to a country halfway around the world? I'd like you to think it's because I'm a world-renowned theater educator and director. That's what I'd like you to think. The truth would more be like, well, I knew somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody, but you get my drift. But there is a history to this. 2005, I was teaching at Pepperdine University in Malibu, California. I was teaching theater. And in the front row was this very bright-eyed freshman with an accent that I couldn't quite place. Wasn't English, wasn't Australian, wasn't New Zealand, was not rough enough for South Africa. I was thinking Fiji. But I'd been to Fiji and it wasn't that. So after a couple of weeks of trying to guess where she was from, I finally said, "Were you raised in Hong Kong?" She goes, "No, I'm from Zimbabwe." Zimbabwe! That sounds vaguely familiar. I didn't have a clue. I went straight to Wikipedia, and this is what I found out. It used to be called Rhodesia, that the capital city is Harare, that there are 3 major languages, English, Shona, and Ndebele, that Zimbabwe is a Shona term that stands for a capital city that used to dominate this part of Africa 1,000 years ago, that you got your independence from Great Britain in 1980, and that President Robert Mugabe has served as president and head of the armed forces since that time. You see, Americans don't know where anything is. It's true. We can't find anything. Now, there are many reasons for this, one of them being an incredibly crappy education system. It is possible that you know more about America than most Americans do. It's sad but true, but I would say that Zimbabwe school children probably know more about America than most Americans do. Now, another reason is that we're huge. We are the 4th largest country in the world. Another reason that we don't know where anything is because the world comes to us. We don't go to the world. This is changing with the rise of China and India, but by and large, the world comes to us. Only 10% of Americans travel. Why? We don't have any money. Oh, I know. According to movies and television, you think we all have like amazing cars and golden guns and $1 million in cash and houses stacked to the rafter with drugs. I'm here to tell you I'm indicative of about 80% of the Americans that you will ever meet. I drive an old truck. I struggle to pay my mortgage. I don't have any drugs. I don't have any guns. And I seriously don't have $1 million in cash. If I can pay my mortgage, put food on the table, send my kids to a good school, and have a little money left over at the end of the month, that's a good month. Americans vacation in America. We go to Florida or New York City or the Grand Canyon. We're not jumping on planes and partying in Paris. So that's why Americans don't know where anything is. We stay at home. But another reason is the ever-changing names of countries in the world. Speaking of Eastern Europe, parts of Asia, and Africa. Now, when I was growing up, there was this magazine, a thick yellow magazine that used to come to my house once a month. It was called National Geographic. And National Geographic was this amazing magazine with articles and photographs in it that told you about exotic places you probably would never go to. And about every 3 or 4 years, there would be an issue with a world map inside. And it would arrive, and you would open it up. Now, National Geographic maps were cool because everything was on them. And you'd open it up, and you'd open it up, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger until it was about the size of a house, and you'd put it on the wall. And there it is, a map of the world. Now there's an unwritten rule about maps somewhere that if it's on a map, it can't change. But obviously some countries haven't gotten that memo. This one specifically. Case in point, United States of America, same name, 275 years. Zimbabwe, 4 names, 90 years. Rhodesia, Southern Rhodesia, Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, Republic of Zimbabwe. Help a brother out, make up your mind.
I'm not sure how much you know about us or our festival already, but in brief, we are the National Institute of Allied Arts, and we organize an annual speech and drama festival for people of all ages, though mostly school children. We see about 10,000 people from all over the country, which is amazing and so invigorating and, well, wonderful. We believe in a motto of confidence through success. Each candidate will need to find the self-confidence to compete against their toughest competitor and critic, themselves. The dates? Well, of course, the festival runs from the end of June to the first week of July. How do those dates sound to you? We have never had an American adjudicator. It would be a first and would make for quite an exciting festival indeed. Anyway, I will leave you with that. It is a rough and rather shabby overview. Let me know your thoughts. Gavin.
So finally there was some light at the end of all this gloomy darkness. Somebody wanted to work with me and they actually seemed excited about it. So after months of having no purpose or direction, finally there was one, getting to Zimbabwe. There was so much to do. There was travel, there were visas, shots, what to prepare, what to bring. Now I'd raised the money for my trip by holding a garage sale, writing a couple of grants, and doing some online fundraising with friends and family. But when you are arranging for a long journey, the thing that you spend the most time on is what to do with home. And for me, that meant the house and the theater. Now, I wanted to make sure that the life I was leaving was going to be there when I got back. So the house, rents needed to be collected, needed to be kept clean, needed to be organized. My roommate Kirk, he volunteered to do that. The thing that was causing me the biggest worry was my theater. How do you keep a theater booked 6 to 8 weeks while I'm on the other side of the world? It was really stressing me. But then all of a sudden, this miracle dropped into my lap. Somebody wanted to rent the theater for 6 months, and they could make the payments online. Zimbabwe, here I come! Now, I never did finish that story about how the festival found out about me and I found out about them. Remember the girl that was sitting in the front row? Her name was Viv. And her parents, Gary and Di, have lived in Zimbabwe and worked here for about 30 plus years. And one day, Viv told me about this drama festival in Zimbabwe, and she wanted to know if I would be interested in coming. She said her mother was part of Gavin's group. I said, sure, why not? I didn't have anything to lose, and then I completely forgot about it. A few months later, I got a phone call from Viv, and she goes, hi, my parents are in Los Angeles. Would you like to have dinner with us? Sure. What I thought was a dinner turned out to be a job interview. I guess I passed because I got Gavin's first letter 6 months later. Now, getting to Zimbabwe is an adventure. If you've ever read Lewis Carroll's Alice Through the Looking Glass, a place where everything is reverse of everything else. For example, you go to the US State Department travel website and you go to the official Zimbabwe website. They're completely different. And shots that you need, visas, how to get into the country. And then you add on top of that all the bad press coming out of Harare in Zimbabwe. And then you add on top of that all the things that Americans tell other Americans about traveling in Africa. Diseases, don't drink the water, don't eat the food. Corruption, everybody's a terrorist. My doctor wanted me to take like 20 shots that were going to cost me $1,200. He wanted me to stay away from ice cubes, drink only bottled water, wash my own food when I went to a restaurant. But mostly he didn't want me to go. NIAA must have thought I was some kind of nut job with all my emails about visas and shots and ice cubes and cholera and yellow fever and malaria. Viv's family was really helpful in answering a lot of my questions, but I finally came to this realization. People have been living in Zimbabwe for about 10,000 years. You seem to be doing fine. So I figured if I would just relax and kind of go with the flow, maybe I'd be okay too. So I got the couple of shots that I needed, decided to get my malaria pills in Zim, and I'd worry about the ice cubes later. Finally, the day of my departure came. Los Angeles, California to Washington, D.C. A really long layover. D.C. to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Addis Ababa to Harare, Zimbabwe. Total travel time, 39 hours, including 14 hours on the ground. You have to remember, I'm traveling on my own dime. I'm very cheap. And I'm willing to put my body through any physical torment in order to save a couple of $100s. The long layover in D.C. saved me $200. I rented a cheap hotel room. I still saved $130. But the day of my great adventure arrived. I had my passport. I had a small, cheap computer. I had a backpack and a carry-on. I arrived at the airport. I took my anxiety pills because I hate to fly. I took 2 vodka tonics. I had eye shades, earplugs, and wearing comfortable clothes to travel in. They called the plane. I wobbled onto the plane. Found my seat, put on my eye shades, put in my earplugs, gritted my teeth as we rolled down the runway, gripped the arms of my chair as the plane lifted off on its way towards Africa. Now, after my long layover in D.C., I had a 13-hour flight to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. I don't know much about Ethiopia. Never been to Ethiopia. Only thing I know about Ethiopia is that I like Ethiopian food. So the day that I arrived, it was a cold, gray, rainy morning, and standing in the airport, looking through the windows across the tarmac, I saw gently rolling hills, and fog was actually rolling in. And for just a moment, I thought I was in Ireland, except for the prayer rooms in every single corner of the airport. Must have been 12 or 14 of them. And there were separate rooms for men and women. And in amongst all those prayer rooms were the duty-free shops that sold cigarettes and alcohol and jewelry and perfume. And the range of dress was amazing. Casual dress like myself, and men in traditional Arab garb or really slick European suits. And for women it was even more diverse. Full burqas to women wearing a hijab to very sexy European clothing. The flight attendants for Ethiopian Air had to walk this very thin line between tradition and modern. It was unlike any airport I'd ever seen before. It was old and run down.